In 2012, Andrew Garfield became Spider-Man, not just a reboot, a reinvention. He wasn't awkward in the same way. He wasn't overly innocent. He felt emotional, romantic, vulnerable. For many fans, he felt real. In fact, years later, some would even call him the most human live-action Spider-Man we've ever seen. So here's the question no one really answered at the time. Why did his universe collapse after just 2 movies, while others got at least 3? Tobey Maguire completed a full trilogy that defined a generation. Tom Holland didn't just get 3 films, he became part of the biggest cinematic universe in history. But Garfield? 2 films. No trilogy, no proper ending, no Spider-Man 3, just silence. Was it bad writing, studio politics, box office failure, or something much bigger happening behind the scenes? Because the truth is, Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man didn't just fail. It became a casualty of timing, ambition, and a studio trying to chase the future before it understood the present. And once you see the full picture, the collapse makes a lot more sense. Garfield's Peter Parker wasn't the invisible nerd hiding in the back of the classroom. He was sarcastic, stylish, emotionally intense. He skateboarded through hallways. He talked back. He carried quiet anger beneath the surface. This Peter wasn't just socially awkward. He was wounded. And that gave the character a different kind of depth. His chemistry with Emma Stone became the emotional core of the films. Their relationship felt natural, full of awkward jokes, real affection, and genuine vulnerability. For many viewers, that romance was the strongest part of the franchise. But here's where things get complicated. Not everyone liked this version of Peter Parker. Some fans felt he was too cool, too confident, too self-aware. Traditionally, Peter Parker represents the ultimate outsider, someone invisible, someone underestimated. Garfield's version didn't always feel invisible. He felt like someone who chose isolation rather than suffered from it. And that subtle difference mattered, because when you reboot an iconic character, you don't just introduce a new performance. You challenge people's childhood memory, and if the reaction is split, even slightly, instead of universal excitement, the conversation became a debate. Was he the most realistic Spider-Man, or not Spider-Man enough? That division didn't kill the franchise, but it weakened the foundation. And when bigger problems arrived later, there wasn't enough unified support to protect it. In 2012, Marvel Studios released The Avengers. It wasn't just a hit, it was a cultural event. For the first time, multiple superhero franchises connected into one massive payoff, and audiences showed up in historic numbers. Suddenly, standalone superhero films felt smaller. The future was clear. Shared cinematic universes were the new gold standard, and Spider-Man, one of the most valuable superheroes in the world, wasn't part of it, because the rights were owned by Sony Pictures. From Sony's perspective, that was terrifying. They were watching Marvel build an empire without their biggest character, so naturally, they wanted their own universe. And they wanted it fast. Instead of slowly building toward a trilogy, Sony began planning something bigger almost immediately. Spin-offs were announced before the sequel even released. The Sinister Six was teased, Venom projects were discussed. Oscorp became the center of a future villain network. The sequel wasn't just a sequel anymore, it became a launch pad. And that's when the focus subtly shifted, from telling the best possible Spider-Man story to positioning pieces for long-term franchise expansion. Now, building a universe isn't a bad idea, but rushing one is. Because when strategy starts leading the creative decisions, the audience can feel it. And once viewers sense that a story exists to set up another story, the magic starts to fade. Then came the turning point, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. This was meant to expand the universe. Instead, it fractured it. Over time, many critics and fans began calling it one of the weakest Spider-Man films, not because it had no good moments, but because it tried to do too much. The problem wasn't one villain, it was 3. Electro, Green Goblin, Rhino. Electro's transformation feels rushed. His motivation shifts too quickly. Harry Osborn's turn into the Green Goblin happens almost overnight. No slow descent. No real build-up. And Rhino? More teaser than character. Instead of one focused conflict, the film splits its attention across multiple setups, and that's the deeper issue. The movie doesn't feel like it's telling one complete story. It feels like it's building future ones. Oscorp experiments, Sinister Six hints, hidden projects, the narrative pauses to advertise spin-offs. The tone swings from emotional tragedy to flashy spectacle. Yes, it made money. But compared to expectations, it underperformed. And in blockbuster filmmaking, perception matters more than profit. Instead of strengthening the franchise, the sequel created doubt. And once doubt enters a cinematic universe, everything starts to collapse. Then came the boldest decision of all. The death of Gwen Stacy. It was comic accurate, it was shocking, and it was heartbreaking. The slow motion fall, the web snapping toward her, that split second of hope, and then silence. And Andrew Garfield sold it completely. The grief felt real, raw, unfiltered. For many fans, it's still one of the most emotional scenes in any Spider-Man film. But Gwen wasn't just another supporting character. She was the emotional foundation of this universe. Her relationship with Peter gave the story warmth, balance, and heart. It grounded the spectacle in something personal. Removing her didn't just raise the stakes, it removed the core. Now, the third film would have needed a complete tonal shift. Darker, heavier, more isolated. That's a risky move in the middle of building a franchise, instead of stabilizing the universe for long-term growth. The sequel destabilized it emotionally, and at that moment, Sony was already unsure about the direction. When a studio feels uncertainty, big changes follow. By 2014, the situation behind the scenes was becoming unstable. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 didn't perform as strongly as Sony had hoped. Critics were harsher, audience excitement was fading, and then something unexpected happened: the Sony email leaks. Private conversations inside Sony Pictures were exposed to the public, internal doubts about the franchise became visible. Plans for spin-offs suddenly felt uncertain. At the same time, negotiations with Marvel Studios started gaining serious momentum. Sony had a choice: continue building their universe alone, or partner with the studio that had just mastered the shared universe formula. There were also reports of tension between Andrew Garfield and studio executives. Whether exaggerated or not, the relationship no longer looked stable, and when a franchise is already struggling creatively, instability behind the scenes makes executives nervous. So, Sony made a historic decision. They partnered with Marvel. Spider-Man would enter the MCU. But that deal came with a cost. Andrew Garfield's universe would not continue. No third film, no resolution, just a reset. Not because he couldn't carry it, but because the business strategy had changed. And in Hollywood, strategy always wins. In 2016, Tom Holland debuted as Spider-Man inside the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The character was reborn, connected, integrated, protected by the machine that Marvel Studios had perfected. Andrew Garfield's era quietly ended. No Spider-Man 3. No proper conclusion, just a transition into something new. For years, it felt like his version had been forgotten. But then, something unexpected happened. In 2021, Spider-Man: No Way Home brought him back, and the reaction wasn't polite applause. It was explosive. Audiences cheered, people cried, clips went viral within hours. Suddenly, the narrative shifted. Fans weren't mocking his version anymore. They were defending it, celebrating it, even apologizing for how it was treated. And in that moment, something became clear. Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man didn't fail because of his performance. He didn't fail because the character didn't work. His universe collapsed because it existed during a massive industry shift, when studios were racing to build empires instead of telling contained stories. He wasn't the problem, the timing was. Sometimes a hero doesn't lose, he just shows up at the wrong moment in history. And sometimes, it takes years for people to realize what they had.